Okay, I need you to say that so that I don't go insane.
You always sound so annoyed whenever I tell you that I'm recording.
No, I always go, all right, great, or something like that. I don't sound annoyed. I need you to tell me.
Well, normally you're just like, did I really need to know that?
I
Do
don't
you
think I am.
really think I needed to hear that?
I've been checking out the beginning of these podcasts, and I don't think I have been.
You're always like, hey, Wizzy, next time, ask me if I want you to say that.
That's not true at all. In fact, I think you're an idiot. Speaking of idiots, hello there, everybody. No, not speaking of idiots. Cut that out.
Speaking with idiots.
I don't want that in the podcast. That was just a joke. Hello there, everybody. I'm Ross Pitt Shark Hunter. Here with me today, as always, is Wizzy Puff. This is Ross and Wizzy's Fanfiction Power Hour. I have gotten real sick of Wizzy's shit. And so I am taking him through the magical land of My Little Pony fanfiction. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Wizzy, how are you doing on this fine day?
I'm doing all right.
You know, I do love to hear that. If you weren't doing all right, well, I don't know what I would have done with myself.
Probably gone on and probably celebrated, Sounds like a you thing to do.
All right, so today we have a treat for you all. We have 2 fan fictions. Both are very sad, and both came out in August of 2012. The first one is called Sleep Tight, My Love by Cobalt Swirls.
So these came out like a few months before the world ended?
Yes, actually, that's very true. Also, a few months before this 3rd season came out. Oh, little baby kitty. Kitty cat. Chapter: Saying Goodbye. The hospital's white rooms and organized atmosphere only made it more difficult for me to focus on the once beautiful mare in front of me. Of course, in my eyes, she was still the most beautiful creature in Equestria.
Then why do you describe her as once beautiful?
You dick. Jeez. But others don't share the feelings for her that I do. Gonna correct that a bit. Don't share the same feelings for her that I do. Her normal snow-white coat had begun to darken and had begun to darken and shed in some areas. Her eyes, once a blue of the deepest seas, now expressed a light and sickly silver color. The energy that she proudly displayed while filling an order of dresses or adventuring with her friends had disappeared almost entirely. Whatever energy was left was being used to keep the dying mare alive. I gently ran my claws through her unkempt mane. Rarity had always paid special attention to it, and it paid off. Each of her luscious curls was its own piece of a puzzle in which the end result displayed a picture of delicate care and beauty. But now her mane remained flattened upon her head, sheltering her weak eyes from the intensity of her surroundings. She had been asleep for a better part of the day, waking up twice to be fed small meals before resting again. We hadn't had much time to talk, but I was okay with that. I didn't need to talk, I just needed to be with her. No one in Equestria could have pulled me from her side. I snapped at Twilight at one point when she tried to convince me that I needed to go home and rest. Glad to see you're still as self-centered as you've always been, I yelled at her. Here she is on her last legs, and you just want me to pretend like everything's all right? I wish it was you in her shoes.
Dang.
And that you were the one going through this. Leave. Go home. I'll be the first to admit that she didn't deserve my outburst. She was only looking out for me, but she didn't understand how little I cared for my own well-being. My attention, my worry, my dedication to life, All of it belonged to Rarity. I gave
Okay, so this
Twilight
Rarity.
Yes. Spike has a crush on Rarity.
Oh, this
Get
is
it now?
Spike?
Yep.
Oh, this is weird.
Oh, calm down. Why is it weird?
I just don't. It's weird. It's like a little kid having a crush on a supermodel and then being with the supermodel in their last breath.
I mean, first off, they are friends.
Well, yeah, but
Second,
it's been more like an older sister, little brother type. Not, I don't want to
no.
describe it as that. It's been like his older sister's best friend type of relationship. At least that's how I've viewed it. I haven't watched the show again for the 1000th time, but that's how I would assume it would have been. Because Spike is like a little boy and she's her own rich, famous woman.
Well, she ain't rich at this point in the show. That's for damn sure. Or famous. Not at this point. At this point, she was just a dressmaker in Ponyville.
Okay. So you said that Twilight is like 20 or something before, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So then that means that Rarity is probably around her age. And Spike is younger than them, meaning that he's probably underage.
Okay. But hear me out here. It's a show about candy-colored horses.
Okay, but this show is supposed to
be friends.
They're supposed, well, yeah, to be friends, but I'm getting vibes of more than friends from this fic.
Spike is fairly mature. I'd say he's about like 15. Oh.
I still don't support a relationship between a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old.
They're just friends.
But that's what I'm saying is, if this fic depicts it as more than that, I'm not okay with that.
It's not. It's just a crush that Spike has on Rarity, not the other way around.
I still feel weird about it from, how it's describing it and everything.
If you saw the show, you'd probably think it better. I gave Twilight a second-rate apology that I wouldn't have accepted if my life depended on it. But Twilight found it in her to forgive me. I think she was aware of how Rarity's sickness was affecting all of us, me in particular. She knew how much Rarity had grown to mean to me in these past few years, and how distraught I had become as she became increasingly sick. If I had to pick a reason for my outburst, I would have to say that it wasn't the fact that she was sick, but rather that I couldn't do anything about it. I got to sit there and just watch as everything I had ever cared about slipped through my claws like sand. The other ponies had reacted, more or less, in their own way. Applejack seemed like she was doing anything she could to keep her mind off of losing a friend. Her farm became her safe haven from reality, as she tended to everything from minor faults in the barn to the endless sea of apple trees. Fluttershy's reaction was actually different than what I had expected it to be. Being as timid as she was, I expected her to stay locked. Yo.
So I just looked through this fic, and it has like maybe one or two lines that aren't Spike.
Is that true?
It looks like it.
You can be Spike.
Nah, you're Spike.
I guess I'm Spike then.
Plus, his lines are very few and far between.
Oh well. I guess you can read the next one.
Nah.
Where was I? You've made me lose track. Being as timid as she was, I expected her to stay locked up in her home, but instead she spent most of her time over at the boutique and caring for Sweetie Belle. Even though she was old enough to look out for herself now, Sweetie Belle needed someone at her side to help her through this. I would have been there myself, but I couldn't find the willpower to leave Rarity alone. Rainbow Dash was similar to Applejack in her way of coping, in that she did what she could to keep her mind off what was happening. That isn't to say she ignored it or didn't acknowledge it. More than once I've heard a faint sobbing coming from the clouds. Pinkie Pie's reaction was second only to my own. All sense of happiness seemed to have faded away entirely, and many ponies who tried to approach her in Sugar Cube Corner were met with a hostile,
"Get lost!"
At least she had the benefit of saying that she never wished a life-threatening illness on her best friend.
Not Pinkie Pie.
The illness itself had been present for years, but remained dormant. After a few days of evaluation, the doctors had concluded that it had come from the venom of a changeling. We had only encountered them once. So far, we had only encountered them once, the day of Shining Armor and Cadence's wedding. But all it took was one day to doom her years later. I spent weeks buried in Twilight's books looking for an antidote, but I couldn't find anything solid. In a way, I can't forgive myself for what I did during those weeks. Instead of making every day count and being by her side, I chased a dead end. I only wish I could take that precious time back. I honestly looked like I should have been in the hospital myself. I hadn't slept in 2 days and hadn't eaten in 7. I became malnourished, but I didn't care. I wasn't what was important at the time. I sleep and eat when I have time. I've wasted enough of it as it is, I told myself. After several hours, Rarity finally stirred awake. She looked at me with those beautiful, wary eyes and gave me the best smile she could muster. I could tell that many of the motions she performed required her to push through mountains of pain and agony. To watch her struggle to do so much as lift her hoof to rub my cheek brought tears to my eyes. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to die. She took her hoof and lifted my head from where it had been, laying on the side of her bed. As I raised my head to look at her, she smiled gingerly and patted her side gently, indicating that I could rest my head against her. I happily obliged, but I was careful not to hurt her. She slowly rubbed her hoof up and down my back in an attempt to comfort me. I loved being so close to her, but even the comfort she gave me couldn't mask the emptiness I was feeling. With my head against her, I could feel her chest slowly rise and fall. Her breaths were shallow and infrequent. Please don't leave me here. I can't lose you. I choked through sobs. I knew it wasn't her choice, but I begged anyway. Maybe that was selfish of me, to want her to stay because I wanted her to. But at the time, I didn't know what else to say.
My little spiky wikey.
This is a sad fic.
Well, I was supposed to sound like I'm dying, right?
I don't think you sound like that when you're dying. I haven't died before. And I'll be honest, I've never actually seen a guy die. But I don't think that's what it'll sound like.
You want me to change the voice? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. The almighty gods have already decided that's what you do, and they will strike us down if you change it. I'm just saying, probably not the best choice, but it's set in stone now, she said quietly. It was the first time I had heard her speak all day. Just hearing her voice was magic in its own right.
Have you been lying here all this time?
I wonder if the author had written this to cope with something.
Are you trying to make me feel bad?
No, I'm just curious. I knew that she knew that I had been, but I nodded anyway. There was nowhere else I wanted to be. She could see how horrible I looked, and I could see the concern on her face. I put on the best smile I could. The last thing I wanted was for her to spend her last moments worrying about me. I lightly ran my claw against her soft coat. Despite how sick she looked, I could still faintly pick up the scent of perfume she had put on before she was admitted to the hospital shortly after. It's not fair. You don't deserve to suffer like this. You deserve to be happy and healthy. You deserve a full life. I clutched the side of the bed in a death grip and turned my face to Rarity's side and wept. As she continued to rub my back, she had begun to hum quietly. Her gentle voice had turned my weeping into quiet sniffles as I listened to her. I closed my eyes and let the sound of her humming overtake me. Deep down, I knew this was her way of telling me that everything was going to be all right, that I didn't have to worry anymore. I felt her chest fall for the last time as her humming quietly subsided. She closed her eyes and silently let herself slip away. Her hoof slowly slid from its spot on my back until it hung lightly at her side. She had passed. I placed her hoof back on the bed and wrapped myself around her. I buried my head into her chest and cried as hard as I could. All of my feelings of anger, sadness, hopelessness, anxiety, and frustration were released. I had the only one I had ever truly loved torn from me in some sick game of fate. I spent what felt like an eternity at her side. I was waiting for her to wake up and tell me that everything was going to be okay. That I didn't need to worry anymore. Please wake up. Rarity, please wake up. I cried. After a few moments, Nurse Redheart entered the room with Twilight following closely behind. Twilight stood next to me while Nurse Redheart shut off Rarity's electrocardiogram.
Electrocardiogram.
Is that how you say that? I was right the second time. Electrocardiogram. I could tell Redheart was worried about my condition, but ignored it. She told us we were more than welcome to stay and say our goodbyes before the doctor could come and take her. She expressed her deepest sympathies and then left Twilight and I to be alone with Rarity. My head was still resting on her chest, but I was faced away from Twilight. I could hear her rummaging through her saddlebag, but at the moment I didn't care to see what she was getting. After a long pause, I could feel a light tap on my shoulder. Reluctantly, I turned my head around to face Twilight to see that she was using her magic to hold up the red, heart-shaped gem that I had given to Rarity years ago. Twilight must have picked it up from the boutique on the way over to the hospital. I plucked the gem from the air with my free hand and examined it. It was still in the same flawless condition that it had been from the day I first gave it to her. In fact, the gem almost looked better, as if it had been tended to several times since then. I placed the gem on the center of Rarity's chest, right where her heart was. Her no longer suffering form was now accented by a beautiful heart-shaped gem that was only surpassed by the real thing. As I looked up at her face, I noticed that her soft smile was seemingly still held across her lips.
Wait.
Despite all...
Heart-shaped gem? It has to be Spinel. This is a crossover fic.
You're one of the worst.
Yeah, well, maybe next time find a fic that'll let me have a part.
Yeah, fair enough. I offered for you to be Spike.
I don't want your charity.
Despite all the pain she went through in her last few days, she died as happy as she had lived. I placed a light kiss on her forehead before finally letting go of her body. Twilight wordlessly embraced me in a hug, and I was more than quick in accepting it. Her willingness to be by my side through this only made me feel guiltier for my past insult. I held her as tightly as I could, bleakly hoping that she would say something along the lines of, "I can fix this." But instead, she remained as silent as the beautiful mare that laid not 3 feet from me. What's a foot? Pony joke.
They use hands.
I finally released my hug on Twilight and wiped the fresh tears that had come to the surface. I looked her in the eyes before giving a slight nod, signifying that I was ready to leave. For a moment, I stood there, reflecting on the memories and adventures that we shared together. It wasn't enough to ease the pain, but it was all I had now. As we turned to go, I took one last look from the doorway, almost expecting her to be gone entirely. But she still laid there peacefully, smile and all. I returned it with a smile of my own. Not a smile like I had given her before, one to mask my emotions and failing health, but a genuine one, knowing she was finally at peace. Sleep tight, my love. Well. I am sorry that you didn't get a whole lot of lines. Ah, crap, this next one is also in first person. You sure you don't want to narrate it?
I'm good. It's your turn to narrate.
All right. If you don't want to narrate so much, don't want any lines so much. Anyways.
I think this one was written well, but I have absolutely zero emotional attachment to these characters.
I can understand that. Me, however, who does have emotional attachment to these characters, I thought it was pretty good.
Sounded a bit out of character for Spike, but you know, I haven't really watched the show.
You haven't. You don't know the first thing about Spike.
But you gotta agree with me. He wouldn't talk like that.
Yeah, maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. This is an alternate timeline.
But you said it took
Twilight
place at
never
some point
got
during the
wings.
show.
Well, actually, it was in the future a bit, as it said. I did not know that at the time. But, you know. Anyways, this one I've been looking forward to.
There's a lone black train a-comin'.
Yeah.
Scraping
That's one of the
all
reasons.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I picked this. Did you say Little Black Train?
I said a lone black train.
Oh.
Because it's
All right.
the name of the fic.
No, that's fair enough. I like the thought of, like, a black train just taking you into the afterlife.
Yeah, it sounds nice. You can
That's
have the
weirdly calming.
You can have the stewardess of death come along and offer you some death peanuts.
I think there's a bit more talking in this one. There is. It's more at the end, but, you know, there is a bit more talking in this.
Zooey Mama.
Lone Black Train by Chief Maximus. Chapter. Lone Black Train. I'm purposefully doing chapter, by the way, because I'm taking a stand against Wizzy. That son of a gun.
Ross doesn't like it when I'm right.
I don't like it when you exist, let alone write. It's been a good long while since I've seen my ma and pa. It was just as well Mac and I got along on the farm just fine after they'd left. We never got an explanation or word of warning. One morning we woke up, and they were gone. Granny wouldn't tell us where they'd gotten off to, but in time we came to understand why. They loved us, or at least I'd like to think they did. They'd tell us every day that Mac and I made them prouder than a group of lions at a caribou eating contest. I always found that saying a bit weird, but it was one of the quirks that made 'em my ma and pa. I have to admit, waiting at this train station at near midnight did make me a bit nervous. The lone gas lamp only lit about half the platform, and the light was only a flickering essence of the sunny days Ponyville was normally blessed with. Long dancing shadows on the old hardwood reminded me of the time the girls and I went to Canterlot to be in that heart-warming play. I'd like to think I made a pretty good advisor to Chancellor Pudd'nhead. Though I gotta admit, any pony with a name like that must have hated her parents. I had just come from a party, though it wasn't the best one I'd ever been to, that's for sure. All of my friends and family were there, wishing me well on my journey. It was a going-away party, but those are always kind of bittersweet, you know? It was like the one they threw for me when I was going to the Canterlot Rodeo, only a little more somber. I was a stubborn fool back then, refusing to return until I had the money I promised them. That was a long time ago. From what I'd heard, they'd all been prepared for this party for a while. I don't know why they insisted on getting all emotional, though. It wasn't like I'd never see 'em get. They knew this trip had been a long time coming. Darn trees aren't as sturdy as they used to be, but they sure are heavy. A midnight train was a bit unusual, but it wasn't my job to question these things. My only job was to get on board. I looked at the clock near the lamp. It was stroke of midnight. Right as I noticed the hand move over the 12, I heard a lonesome whistle echo through a lonesome whistle echo across the empty fields. I figured that was my ride. The boards neath my hoof began to shiver, making my legs feel kind of numb for a spell. Looking down the tracks, I was nearly blinded by the white light. Blinded by the light.
You just had to do that.
I did. But hey, one episode you just had to make a Trump joke, so I think we'll both let it slide.
I forget what that was, but it was probably funny.
It wasn't. Anyways.
It was. Come on.
It wasn't. No.
What was it?
I can't remember. I just know it wasn't funny. Didn't laugh at the
Yeah.
time. Didn't laugh while editing it. Wasn't funny.
To literally anyone else, it would have knocked their socks off.
I might have actually deleted that part. Oh well, who knows. I was nearly blinded by the white light of the headlamp at the front of the engine. The steam billowing out of the side of the sides and the stack was in sharp contrast to the color of the train. From what I could tell in the dim light, it was a simple black engine, black coal car, and a few passenger cars. They didn't look very modern, but I wasn't one to take a free trip for granted. As I pulled into the station, I could see some of the faces of the ponies and griffins already on board. Some were asleep, some looked tired, others scared. I couldn't imagine why. It was just a dang train. Once it finally came to a stop, the engine hissed in relief, releasing the pent-up steam in a cloud covering most of the platform. I could see the shadowy form of what I reckoned was the conductor stepping down from the lead car. Once the steam began to clear, I could see he was wearing an old-time conductor's outfit, the kind with polished buttons and straight lines and such. Rarity'd probably know.
Oh, yeah, because modern conductors don't have straight lines and polished buttons.
Do you know conductors, Lizzie?
Yeah, I know conductors.
How many trains have you been on in the last 30 years?
30 years. 30.
Yeah. I assume that's when they disbanded the, old-timey uniforms and such.
30 years.
All right. Yep. Can tell that's going nowhere. Rarity'd probably know what it was called, but his uniform didn't look all that sharp. The buttons were a bit tarnished, and the jacket looked like it had been meant to be worn by a bigger pony.
Applejack!
Gosh, I hate you.
Oh my god, you
Not
are
because
not
that's
going to let me do any voice.
Not because that's a bad voice, but because it's literally the same that you used earlier.
What? The one I used earlier was Applejack!
Alright, yeah, a bit different, but, still annoying.
Literally just inhaling and talking at the same time versus an old person voice.
He asked, his voice a lot more gruff than I'd expected from a unicorn his size. I wouldn't call him old, more like worn. He had some gray stubble around his chin, kind of sunken eyes, and a slim mouth, almost like a cut across his face. His wiry mane stuck out from beneath his conductor's hat at all kinds of weird angles, so I could imagine this feller taking good care of himself. Ma taught her foals not to judge other ponies, so I just nodded.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, still as annoying as the first time. He grumbled in that raspy voice of his. I didn't know many railway ponies, but I'd have to imagine most of them sounded like he did. Racist. He opened the door to the first car, and I climbed up the steps. I was alone. No pony else in all 30 seats but me. Ain't any pony else? I turned to ask him, but he was gone, and the door had been shut. I shrugged my shoulders and took a seat. As the train lurched forward, I watched the station drift past the window in the darkness. Then some of the fields, then the town of Ponyville itself. I recalled all the fond memories I'd made there, as well as the friends I'll never forget. I hated leaving, but I knew this was something that wasn't really an option. A girl needs to see her parents, and I'm glad I'm finally able to. But it did leave a certain bitter taste in my mouth. As I sank into the plush of the seat, I looked around what was apparently my private car and thought about the unique situation I'd found myself in. All alone, headed on a westbound odyssey on a train with no name. Granny Smith had always told me that train hopping used to be a good way to get from place to place in Equestria before roads. Maybe some of my ancestor ponies had done the same thing I'm doing. Well, I reckon all my ancestors have done it at one point or another. Ponyville was long gone, though I could still make out the dim lights of the town in the distance. I'd wager at least some of those lights belonged to my friends and family. I just hated leaving them so suddenly like this. A lot of them were sure I'd stick around. Heck, even I was sure of it. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, I'm on this train, and I'm headed back home. Outside the train car was pitch black. No fields, no sparsely populated countryside, no lone farmhouses set in a field of corn or wheat. Just the darkness of the night surrounded the train as it plowed onward to its destination. As the wheels rumbled beneath me, I fought with a sense of joy building in my heart. My parents were sure to be waiting for me once this mighty beast came to a stop, and I'd be ready for 'em. I could already see the moment we'd reunite, I'd step off the train, they'd be there just as I remembered them from so long ago. At the same time, I hated that I was the only one of my family that got to go on this trip. I know Mac missed them, and I know Apple Bloom's never even met him. And of course, Granny Smith missed her daughter. Well, actually, son, but, this was written in 2012.
Wait, what?
What?
Do you say something about Applejack as a son?
No, Granny Smith.
Oh. Wait, I'm confused.
Honestly, listen. It says Granny Smith missed her daughter. But actually, it was her son. Not her daughter. Her daughter was a pear. Her son was an apple.
Wait, what?
Well, no. Their mom was a pear, and their dad was an apple. Granny Smith is an apple.
I'm so confused.
I could show you a diagram. It's actually very simple. You see, Granny Smith had a son who was their father, who was like Applejack and Big Mac's father, right?
Yep.
Another family on another farm had a daughter. That was their mother. This fic says Granny missed her daughter, but she had a son, not a daughter.
Okay, but you said something about a pear and an apple giving birth to a pony.
Right. Good Lord. Apples, Applejack, Apple Bloom, Big Macintosh, those are the Apple family.
Right. But you said an apple.
Right, yes. I forgot that you're not in tune with pony lingo. We just basically call them that.
Okay.
Just say apples and pears and all that. It's actually very simple.
So basically, it would be like saying the Smiths or the Johnsons.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, Granny Smith missed her daughter. But good, Celestia fearing earth ponies like myself don't question the divine. But now, I'm sure Apple Bloom has finally cried herself to sleep in Mac's bed, and I'd wager Mac's done the same. I hated seeing the anguish on the faces of my friends and family, but I took comfort in knowledge that I'd see them again. A glimpse of a couple trees outside my window reminded me of one of my closest friends. I remembered the first time Rainbow challenged me to that Iron Pony competition. She said she'd miss me the most, and I believed her. But that's RD for you, always having to be the best at something. I just wonder whose hat she tried to steal every dang day now. Even though she was a dirty cheating pony during the contest, I didn't care. I was just happy to be around her.
Was she?
Even though
Ooh. Rainbow.
Even though on the outside she was more concerned with winning, she would later tell me that deep down, she was just trying to impress me. I couldn't imagine why. I was just a simple earth pony trying to keep my farm from going under, and she was practically a shoo-in for the Wonderbolts. A lot of pillow talk would reveal that she could never actually join the Wonderbolt. Well, funny thing. She did.
Who?
But, you know.
Did she rejoin flight school or something?
No, I don't think she ever dropped out of it.
It said that she dropped out of flight school. Yeah.
Yeah, but not in the actual show.
What? I thought this was canon, man.
No, it's not. Could you believe it?
Darn. Well, at least Applejack's not really dead.
She is to be.
Worse.
That was the first time I'd ever seen her cry. I don't mean get teary-eyed. I mean really, truly cry. She had a dream she'd wanted since she was just a filly, and it was forever out of her reach. I couldn't really empathize, as the farm had been all I'd ever known or wanted, but I comforted her all the same. I remember the nights we'd hang out in the hayloft, shooting the breeze. I always figured Rainbow's independent attitude was just a cover. Every pony needs some pony to confide in, and I was her some pony. I set my eyes to the sky as the pitch blackness outside continued to envelop the train.
You know, I can kind of ship Appledash.
Great, it's canon.
What?
Yep, last episode.
You're so lying.
Nope. I can show you the clip. After the podcast, of course. If not for those wonderfully twinkling stars, I'd have thought we'd have been riding through Tartarus itself. They were brilliant, but Princess Luna's pride was something amazing to behold. I'd once recalled Twilight telling about how every star in the sky is like our own sun, and could have all kinds of strange and alien planets floating around it. It's hard for a simple earth pony like myself to grasp such an idea, that every star could hold a planet of creatures looking into their own night sky and wondering if any other intelligent life is looking back at them. I never considered it like that before. That's steep. Twilight. Of all the friends I'd made in Ponyville, she's the one I'm the most concerned about. She's a brilliant unicorn, much smarter than I or any pony else in our hole in the town. Well, than I or any pony else in our hole-in-the-wall town could hope to be. But what she knew in book smarts, she sometimes lacked in common sense. She'd once wandered into the Everfree forest and gotten herself turned to stone by a cockatrice. All the book learning in the world can't make up for something like that. But she was a good girl, with a good head on her shoulders. The princess was pretty smart to choose her to be her student. I only wish I'd have gotten a bit more time with her. I know the farm was my life, but before my parents left, I had other dreams and aspirations. Don't get me wrong, I got my cutie mark because I realized the farm was where I belonged. But that didn't mean I have other But that didn't mean I didn't have other interests. As embarrassing as it is for me to admit this, I was never a very good teacher, a very good reader. Good Lord.
Relatable.
Yes, same, clearly. As a matter of fact, Applebloom had surpassed me early in her schooling, and I had to give all of her language homework to Mac to avoid embarrassing myself. I wasn't illiterate, but I was darn close. The only other pony who knew about my problem was Twilight. When I first came to her, and she figured out my little secret, I was so embarrassed. Instead of looking down her nose at me, she offered to help me. She wanted to show me all that I'd been missing out on. Every day when I could get away from the farm early, I'd head over to her library and we'd start our lesson. At first, we started with Foal's books. I hated the idea of starting out with something childish, but she always told me you had to trot before you could gallop. It was hard, and I would get really frustrated and want to quit. I know that ain't like me, but it's Celestia's honest truth. I wanted to quit.
Are these memories based on actual episodes?
Nope. Well, a few of them, but this one, no.
Okay.
I wanted to quit and go back to the life I knew several times, but she wouldn't let me. Twilight insisted I keep trying, insisted I keep sounding out them troublesome words until I could pronounce them correctly. I'll always love her for that. She showed a hard-headed earth pony what persistence could accomplish. The train pulled me out of my memories, beginning to slow. I pressed my cheek against the cold glass, trying to see where we ended up. I looked down and could see no ground, or even tracks beneath the iron wheels. In the distance, I could see a light. It was just a pinpoint at first, but as we got closer, it grew in intensity and size.
No, Applejack, don't go towards the light.
Too late. 15 years too late. I noticed the platform and train station come into view, as daylight seemed to rise out of the darkness, creating a visible line between the darkness we'd come through and the light we were headed towards. The train came to a halt, the steam obscuring any pony waiting at the station from view, though I could make out a few hazy outlines in the cloud. The conductor came up the steps with a clipboard in his magic, held out in front of him.
Applejack, this is your stop.
Good to know the gods won't be killing us today, he said, opening the door for me. You mean this train goes to more than one place? I asked. I mean, how often do you get a chance to ask a question like this?
Indeed, but you don't want to know where the line ends.
Hell.
Ooh!
I could tell by his tone he wasn't fooling around. I hopped down the steps and waited for the smoke to clear as the train took off toward whatever awful destination awaited those who hadn't disembarked. Oh, fuck. Jesus. As the steam evaporated, I noticed ponies in all types of clothes, some wearing Old West outfits, some in big poofy dresses, and others in still modern-looking clothes. Modern-looking clothes as in not wearing them.
Applejack?
I turned around, hoping my memory of that voice was still reliable. There stood my ma and pa, both overjoyed and a bit teary-eyed to see me. I couldn't hold myself back any longer. I charged straight at them, feeling both their forelegs around me tightly. Words couldn't begin to describe how much I missed this feeling. I was finally with them. I was finally home.
Sugar Cube, we're sorry you had to go so soon.
It's okay, I assured them. I'd always miss my friends, and I'd always long for the day when they would ride the lone black train to be with me. Still, part of me hoped for them. It would be a long time coming. I'm just glad I'm here now.
We thought we'd see Granny Smith before we'd see you, darling.
My father whispered. Both of my parents still clung to me tightly. So did every pony else. So did the show, apparently.
But that stubborn grandma just wouldn't die.
Fun fact in the show.
No.
They killed off Granny Smith?
Off screen, and it was in an episode that was taking place in the future. Spoilers for the last episode of My Little Pony. The past is the past. So did every pony else, I replied, finally releasing them. Apple Bloom and Mac are probably feeling pretty down about now. I laminated. I hated to know my kin are upset when there wasn't anything I could do to tell them I'm in a better place.
If you like, I can pass the message along, Applejack.
That voice is hard to maintain.
Yeah,
oh, wait,
well,
no, that
shouldn't
wasn't.
have maintained it. That was a different character.
Princess Celestia, come on.
If you like, I can pass a message along, Applejack.
The gods won't get us for that one, trust me. I recognized that voice. I turned around and lo and behold, Princess Celestia was standing right behind us. Princess, but you ain't.
Dead? No, my little pony. You can't just put that in there. Come on.
Yeah, you can.
Oh my god, that's the name of the show.
Yeah, she says it like all the fucking time. Why do you think it's called My Little Pony?
Definitely not because of that, because I know that that was not the first My Little Pony product.
Ooh. Well, someone's got some knowledge on him, doesn't he?
You see,
But was it
I'm
the
an
second?
insider at Hasbro.
But was it the second?
No?
You're right. This guy's good. Where the fuck were we?
I'm very much alive. Communication between planes of existence is not possible for an alicorn, you know.
She smiled.
I trust Sharon conducted the train smoothly.
He did, I answered. Could you tell my friends and family I love them and I'm happy and for them to not spend too much time crying for me?
I shall. Know that all of the elements miss you more than I can express. Oh, express, because train joke, I get it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it. Choo choo, you know? I nodded. Thank you, Princess. Tell him I miss him too, would you? She smiled softly.
I noticed all these fics with like the southern ponies use AH instead of the letter I. Because like, ah.
Well, yeah. How else you gotta express that they are Southern?
Just
You
tell
call
them that
motherfucker?
they have a southern accent, you know, they'll read it with a southern accent. I don't know.
Well, that would just be darn tootin' crazy.
With you to watch over them, I'm sure they'll feel better soon enough.
As a Texan myself, I also write with AH.
Scratch that. They actually just jumped off a cliff.
Jesus. That's fucked.
You see, most of them were okay because they were Pegasi, but you see, Twilight did not make it.
Rest in peace, Twilight. I get to see Twilight soon. Anyways, you have one over here.
What?
Read.
Oh, I thought that I already did.
No, you read that one, but you didn't read that one.
Oh, is this still Celestia?
Yep.
Weird. Now go. Your ancestors await your arrival.
She added, opening a brightly lit portal beneath her wings, which all other ponies on the platform began walking through. Goodbye, Princess, I whispered, a tear falling from my eye.
Do not cry because your life is over, Applejack. Smile because it happened. Celestia's totally ripping off whoever actually originally said that quote. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, this fix sucks. Anyways.
Yeah! Totally ripping off the black train metaphor and the quote at the end. Yeah!
What kind of a fan fiction is this?
They're
Some
totally ripping
Chief
off the show
Magnus
My Little
guy.
Pony with ponies named Applejack and stuff. Couldn't you tell?
Yeah. Anyways, I like that one.
I thought it was nice. Sort of bittersweet.
Yeah.
But also they killed off Applejack, so screw them.
Hey, at least she gets into the afterlife, not as an old person.
Oh my god, I thought you read the Bible. It says if you get into heaven, then all your ailments are cured.
But the conductor was old, man.
He wasn't old, she said he was gruff.
I'm
And
just
tired.
saying. Well, you did listen, I see. I'm just saying. Oh, this was featured in Apple Dash. I guess that makes sense. Pillow talk and all that. Anyways, yeah, like I said earlier, I love the thought of like a lone black train, quote unquote, because that's the title of the fic. I love that image, you know.
I see you're a fan of Over the Garden Wall, then.
I am, but Over the Garden Wall has kind of a different thing, you know. Even though that technically does take them, it actually fits more in with the original concept for Over the Garden Wall, where it was a train taking them back to the world of the living. But they thought it, like the two main characters were thinking that it was a train taking them to the world of the dead, so they jumped off and were in purgatory. But actually, it was taking them to the world of the living.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah.
I hope the creators make something similar to that later on.
I love
But I
that
think
concept.
that Over the Garden Wall is perfect as it is.
Kind of, yeah. Frankly, I watch it like annually. Think it's impossible not to watch it every Halloween for me.
Samesies.
Aw, samesies. Such a cute word, samesies. Anyways, please, 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 please go check out these fics. We definitely did not do them I definitely did not do them justice.
Okay, well, I definitely did do Verity's voice justice, but everything else, you can totally go check out the fic at https://www.fanfiction.net/store, and that's all I can read of the URL before it cuts me off.
Yeah, they'll be in the description, so don't you worry.
Oh, they don't have to type them out character for character. How convenient.
I know. It's almost like we're living in a modern age.
I think that about wraps everything up.
I do too. Thank you all for watching. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Today I'm sipping apple juice
That's
in
brilliant.
honor of the deceased apple ponies Brayburn and Applejack.
Well, they are both dead, aren't they? Isn't that wild?